Welcome, Divine Goddess, for another episode on Chloe Tremor Therapy Podcast. I am delighted to have you here. And today's topic is going to be about childbirth. And just childbirth, basically. It's really a topic that I really wanted to talk about. And as a mom, for starters, as a mom, of course, because I'm not going to talk about something I've never experienced. As a mom and as a woman who had her first child, and had her child in a hospital. So I birthed my daughter in a hospital. I really wanted to emphasize on that. But also, as a holistic therapist that supports women in healing trauma, really wanted to talk about this topic. Okay. Um, so one of the things that when I first was as a new mom, when I first got pregnant, I was flooded with information on how natural birth was better, how breastfeeding was better. I don't know for you, but I know that when I got pregnant, in some shape or form, I was constantly, through everything I would consume about childbirth, reminded of how, like, put so much pressure on to have a natural birth. I felt like I had to have a natural birth. I felt like I had to have a completely natural birth without any form of her anesthesia or anything, and felt like I needed to have a home birth and felt like I needed to have all this perfect I had that basically the expectations for a healthy birth was having a natural birth, not birthing in a hospital, breastfeeding your child to give them the best nutrients possible. And all of a sudden, I was flooded with all this pressure from spiritual gurus, from coaches, from, even doulas sometimes, from a lot of, content when I would do some research on that. And it was a lot of pressure. And I remember consuming a lot of books on natural birth, on, how to have a natural birth, and just having this feeling like, okay, I have to have this. I'm capable of this, and everything, like starting to put pressure on myself. Because at the time it didn't feel like pressure. But it was actually a lot of pressure that I started to put on myself. We often talk about, you know, how to say, yeah, we often talk, I mean, since a few decades, I feel like we've been natural birthing and science and knowledge around the female's body has been arising, and we've become more curious. And through feminism, we broaden our minds on that as well, and slowly, kind of became very interested in that, which is wonderful, which is really wonderful. But you know from a holistic therapist point of view, from a therapist point of view, from a mental health advocate and mental health, supporter, and someone who is supporting, people through healing their mental health. And as someone who had, experienced a lot of, on my journey, mental health disorders, mood disorders, and experienced a lot of trauma, the reality when you experience trauma, when you experience, a mental health disorder, you start seeing reality in a different way. You start seeing life in a more complex way, and it makes you understand how way more complex, life is and a human being is. And as someone who's experienced trauma and having mental health disorders, um, this, this made me really, over time on my journey, realize that birthing a child once I've experienced it as well. Birthing a child is part of someone's healing journey, you know? And our healing journey is about healing trauma. And as human beings, part of our experience is that we hold trauma. It's inevitable. If we were in a world where no one was holding trauma, where we were completely healed, living in harmony with nature, which we aren't, okay? You can be the most peaceful person. I don't care, how healed, quote unquote, healed you are. Uh, I mean, I would definitely think like, if you're living in harmony with nature, in harmony with yourself, uh, taking parts in activism for the world, for humans' liberation, for Palestinians, for Congolese, for Sudanese, for Yemen, people in Yemen, and many countries that are experiencing horrible things that have been experiencing horrible genocides for a long time, for instance. Like, that would be the kind of human being, if you were, a woman, that would be able to give natural birth to a child, without it being, um, without facing their traumas, without having to face too much difficulties. Okay. Um, yes, but today we live in a world where we're all holding traumas, and this is what prevents us women, from oftentimes having the birth we have the potential to have, because birth is part of our human and emotional experience and happens through our bodies that holds certain traumas, certain internalized emotions. And this is why a lot of women, even if you're giving, a home birth, still experience trauma due to birthing. And none is and we have to be aware that even if we are having a natural birth and we successfully have our natural birth without having any complication, having to be rushed to the hospital, um, we have to be aware that there's a high chance that we get birth trauma, that we have afterwards to kind of digest everything and know how to, move through it. That's the reality of it, unfortunately, And as much as, we would love to have this ideal birth, um, it's going to be an experience of facing pain, That's the truth. And it's not because, like, as a woman, it's not because you don't have a home birth. It's not because you didn't successfully, you know, have your home birth and ended up in the hospital, having to get the proper care, that you failed, that you're not a woman, that you're not an empowered woman. And I think one of the things that I often received afterwards, from specifically people who are very much spiritual and in this kind of like um natural approach, which is good, which is positive, which we absolutely need, doesn't take away that, but you're made to feel ashamed of having a hospital birth, of yeah, but maybe if you weren't in the hospital you would have a better birth. Yeah, maybe, but honestly, in my own journey, I feel like I needed to be in a hospital, and I had my natural birth, and I was actually, in a space where I was completely free of being in whatever position I wanted to be. I had like a room with, a bathtub. I had everything I asked for, in that hospital. And um although, being in a hospital can increase stress, and I totally agree that, for birthing you need like a soft space, which makes absolute sense. um I would have not been able to give birth at my home and completely naturally, because my body would have not been able, just couldn't take it, and I have my own traumas and stuff, and emotional world that I still was holding, which which wouldn't have allowed me to do so. And intuitively I knew that I needed to be in a hospital. It felt safer, and intuitively I felt more aligned. But this doesn't take away, if you, for instance, end up birth if you're not a mother and you're a future mother and then you end up in a hospital, please don't feel ashamed. And if you've never had a natural birth, please don't feel ashamed. Everything, we all have a different experiences, we all have a different traumas, a different karma, okay? And it's not because you end up in the hospital or you prefer going to the hospital to give birth, um that it means that, you haven't read enough books on natural birthing. You haven't done enough research, or you haven't trust yourself enough, or whatever guilt tripping we face as women constantly. Like, being women is always being oppressed on some level. Whatever we do, there's always something wrong with us. We always have to question ourselves. Always have to be better. We always have to, like, constantly be better and pressure ourselves, and we're perfectionists, basically. Like, men are never asked to do that, but we have to question ourselves on every single fucking thing. So I wanted to make this episode to tell you that birthing then does you don't birthing a child, being pregnant, is already tremendously, it's a tremendous roller coaster. It's tremendously, like, uh it's a huge change. It tremendously changes your body. It tremendously changes your reality. It tremendously changes your hormones, and has a huge impact on your emotional experience, on everything. It's huge. It's a huge change. It's a huge um turnover of your world. It's a huge disruption. Although it's beautiful, it's still a huge disruption of your experience as a human being. And so you don't need to add more pressure on yourself. You don't need to read all the books. You don't need, because honestly, as someone, I think a lot of women who've birthed children will agree on, and something I want to tell you as someone who's birthed a child, you can read all the books, you can practice all the exercise, but the moment you're in it, the moment you're in your labor, you get, like, those will not serve you at all. It's good to read a little about it. Of course it's good to read a little bit about it. Um, but maybe talk with women who've birthed already children, or maybe talk with a doula or a midwife, or a mother who's a midwife, who can actually, give you tips, and at the same time, be there when you're birthing. Because one thing I know for sure is that what has helped me the most during my birth is not all the books that I've read, all the techniques, that I've seen and try to practice. It's the support system around me. It's the people around me. It's the compassion, it's the support. It's also the people around me and the confidence they had in me that I can see in their eyes, that changed the game. Um, I I had an epidural, but it didn't last very long, so I felt my entire birth, and it lasted for a very, very long time. And, just by the look of a doctor who looked at me and told me, "I know you're capable of getting that child out of you. you're capable of doing that. Just having someone believing in me and having someone in those moments, because no matter how confident you are, no matter how strong-willed you are, if you have a big character, if you have a big personality, you're gonna be in a vulnerable place, you know, and it's okay to be vulnerable, and it's part of birthing to be vulnerable. I think this is the most important to remember, is that birthing is also surrendering and to being vulnerable and not trying to be the strong one, which, let's be honest, as women, we're taught to be strong. We have to take everything on our shoulders, and we haven't been taught to actually surrender, to actually, you know, and as a species in general, like to surrender. We tend to want to fight, you know, when things get difficult instead of surrendering. And birthing is all about surrendering, actually, you know, birthing is all about being vulnerable, being in this quote unquote fragile state, quote unquote surrendering state of crying, screaming, expressing your pain. Like that's what birth is about. Like you have to be able to be vulnerable and to scream, to let out like what you're feeling, the pain you're feeling. You're not meant to hold everything together and control it. And that is one of the things that I wish, for instance, someone have told me, like, you have to surrender, you have to surrender, you have to let go and surrender, and it's okay if you scream, because you're gonna scream, you're gonna scream, you're gonna raw, you're gonna be like, you're gonna be in this primal energy where you're gonna be screaming, yelling, you know, making sounds. Like you're not gonna be pretty, pinky, rosy, cute. No, like that's what a woman, like a woman never was meant to be, this pinky, rosy, smiling thing, you know, like you're gonna be actually raw and an actual woman. You're going to connect with your womanhood, you're going to connect with your primal life force energy, and it's not going to be cute and it's not going to be pretty. There's going to be blood everywhere, you know, like, and it's, you know, um your and tell your, and your partner should be aware of that, you know, like that's why a lot of men faint during birth, because the women's power, women's birthing is so, is actually brings them to like fucking reality and women's fucking power. So that's why a lot of men are uncomfortable with birthing, because it's where you're the most connected, you know, to your womanhood and life force, you know, um and of course that doesn't mean that this defines you as a woman and you need to have children to be, you know, a woman and connected to your womanhood and connected to your life force and primal energy. But it's one of those experiences that if you experienced it, you're gonna be, it's gonna, you know, connect you straight to your life force energy, basically, you know. And this you can probably high, you know, there's many things that you, there's many experiences that you can have that have the same effect, but birthing is definitely one of those things that is very, very raw, you know, and one of those things in womanhood that we, if we choose, can have the opportunity to experience, but also that society tries to like, you know, it's still taboo. Like it tries to make it as, oh, this is so beautiful, you have your baby born, but like, no, actually, like it's not a cute thing, you know. We try to make it as if, oh, it's so cute, it's going to be beautiful with little, you know, music, and you see the baby, you see the little toes, but right before you're fucking screaming, you know, your lungs out, you're just, you know, just calling everyone names. You're just being very, very raw. And it's important that you have to be raw like that. You have to be able to be raw like that. You have to be able to just be out of control. And it's that moment where you surrender and you're kind of like feeling out of control completely, um, like you're feeling like all this, you're letting this pain, you know, channeling this pain and channeling this pain and healing at the same time, healing your you know, your karma, healing your lineage, healing your ancestors through being this portal. So it's not meant to be cute, and it's not meant to be all this sweet little thing, like fussy rosy thing that society tries to make out of it. It's absolutely not the case, you know. And I wish people have told me that, because every time I would ask like a mother how was their birthing, it would just always be like, this avoidance, like, oh, it's okay. But and even this shame, like, oh, I'm not really proud. Like, no, actually it's beautiful. It's like when you're having sex and you're connected really to your pleasure. It's not going to be aesthetic. It's not going to be like aesthetic, or maybe as aesthetic, as a like a porn, like a porn scene or anything. You're actually be gonna be very primal, very raw. It's not gonna be, when you actually surrender to an orgasm, or you actually surrender to your pleasure. It's very raw, it's not cute. And that's why, but in our society, we've oppressed, of oppressed women, because we're oppressed. Um, we're not allowed to express ourselves this way. It's too frightening for men. It's too frightening for the patriarchy. But it's in this place that we are in our most the most connected to our primal energy, our life force. And it's important that we allow ourselves to do that. And I think that's the most important in birthing. It's not the thing around, it's not how you birth, where you birth, if you like have all the aesthetics, or if you're like in the perfect, you're having your home birth and it's beautiful, or even in a hospital and it's like beautiful. Like you see women going in the hospital and then up, like it just lasted for 3 minutes and then there's the baby. Like you don't see her like screaming, yelling or anything, but that's the reality. That's the biggest part of becoming a mother, in a sense, like, yes, you get your baby after, but this part is going to affect you. This part is going to have a huge impact on you. You're never going to be the same after. So I want to say, like, the most important, if you're about to have a child, or if you feel like you've been shamed for the way you had your child, is to remember that it's about the rawness, it's about the surrender, it's about keeping your faith, holding on, no matter how difficult it is, no matter how painful it is. Um, and that you're gonna do naturally, you know? And yes, you might have complications. It might not go the way you wanted. You might need to be in the hospital. Um, or you might prefer being in the hospital because it feels safer, because you're not sure if you're going to be, if you're not sure how your body is going to react. Well, good for you. Like that really doesn't matter. And sure, there's a lot of things in the hospitals that are not necessarily um you know natural, like birth friendly necessarily. But I don't know for you, but I know that in France, for instance, we have a lot of hospitals that privilege natural birth. So also you can choose today. Nowadays, we have also hospitals that are natural birth friendly, and you can choose a hospital like that, that makes sure that they are, uh, you know, focusing on natural birth and giving the opportunity for natural birth, and doing everything without intervention, without forcing any kind of uh, you know, um, medical equipment on you. And there are many hospitals who are very much that way. And I'm very prone to, like, I'm a firm believer in balance. I really don't like extreme thinking, black or white thinking. I think there's always a middle ground in everything in our experience as human beings. Um, and it's important to be able to see nuances in everything, because nothing is never black and white. Um, and yes, there are certain things that are truth and that we need to acknowledge. But in terms of birthing, in my opinion, you can still have a friendly clinic, a friendly hospital that is like natural birth friendly, that are not necessarily going to take you to a C-section very quickly. Honestly, I was in a hospital like that, and that's why I was able to actually have a natural birth. Maybe in another hospital, they would have given me a C-section right off the bat. But they have had faith in me. They believed in natural birth. So the doctor, the midwives were all waiting and actually giving me the opportunity to believe in myself and to actually have that natural birth. Even if I had complications afterwards, I personally believe that a lot of my complications also were due to to the fact that I was exhausted and that just a reaction of my body. So, and I'm very grateful that they believed in me, that they were able to let me have this natural birth when I was the one asking for a C-section. So, I was the one like kind really doubting and being like, I just need a C-section. Like, I'm not gonna be able to do this. And we actually all go, I'm sure, like majority of women go through that phase where you're just like, actually, I just want a C-section. Like, when the time I was thinking like I want a natural birth and all this thing. Well, I changed my mind. Can I have a C-section now? Like, we are so many. I'm highly convinced that we all go through this phase when we're in labor. Like, I'm actually like, I feel like I'm dying. I just want to have a C-section. It's too painful. So honestly, having someone who believes in you, having a doula, having a midwife, having someone to cheer you up, to be your cheerleader, I think can have is the most beautiful thing. And also the moment, also important to know what are your limits as well. Like, if you're the kind of person that pushes herself too much and tend to like overwork yourself, maybe know your limits also for your health. Like, it's all this, you know, it's also like the most important is your health and the baby's health, obviously. And there's no right way to give birth, honestly. Yes, we have ancestral knowledge. Yes, we've been disconnected from Mother Earth. Yes, we have the potential to give birth in a very spiritual, beautiful, the way it's meant to. But we have trauma, and it's important to remember that we have trauma. We are human beings. Um, our experience, trauma is part of our experience, and things are not just black or white. It's not because you're spiritually awoke that you still don't hold trauma in your body and it's not going to affect your birth. You know what I mean? Like, and it's important, to not put pressure on yourself. Like, if it's your first child, for instance, do not put pressure on yourself. And if it wasn't your first child, and if you already had children, like, do not shame yourself, for God's sakes. Like, giving birth is beautiful, whatever way that is. And I know that for me, consuming all those books and all this content on, oh my God, like horrifying experiences of hospitals and how hospitals like do this and do that, and kind of like, making hospitals and the medical field evil. And feeling like, oh my God, like if I go to a hospital, it's not going to go well, or feeling like stressed out, I have to have a home birth, but at the same time, I'm fucking scared to have a home birth because I don't feel like I can handle it. Like, I just don't feel like I feel safer to be in a hospital for the moment. There's nothing to be ashamed of. Like, what is the most important is your health. It's your baby's health, and it's everyone's health, and it is not having, like, not putting yourself at risk. If you feel like intuitively, and that's where intuition comes in. If intuitively you feel you want to have a home birth, you feel guided to have this home birth, things align with it, then beautiful. Like, go ahead of it. And if you have this home birth and then at the end you start having complication, you have to go urgently to the hospital, then that's also a home birth. That's also a natural birth. That's also perfect. That's also beautiful. And it's okay, if your body is reacting in a certain way, if things don't go necessarily exactly the way you pictured it. It doesn't mean that you were not connected to your baby enough. It doesn't mean that you were not doing everything you were supposed to do. It doesn't mean like you don't need to be shamed. It doesn't mean, oh, you had some blocks and that's your fault. You should have cleared your blocks before giving. No, like, birth is part of healing. Trauma healing is part of our life, and certain things can only be healed through experiences. I will continue saying that sometimes we need those freaking experiences to heal. And birthing is one of those experiences where it really enables you to heal deep trauma and to face, process deep trauma, and also acknowledge, like realize that you have deep trauma if it creates more trauma in you, and being able to actually dive deeper into your mental health and explore trauma healing, um in any ways. This is like an opportunity to heal, and it's your higher self guiding this, it's your higher self guiding this healing. So yes, if we were living in utopia, and we didn't have trauma, and we didn't have a lineage of abused women, raped women, killed women, we didn't have the witch wound, we didn't have the colonialism wound from from our ancestors being colonialized, and from women being oppressed, like if we hadn't all those trauma, yes, probably there would be a high chance we could have like very successful natural birth without having traumas, okay? Without being traumatized by the birth. But that's not reality, and it's important to talk about it. I know that, you know, it's a hard truth to swallow, but I feel like I wanted to make this episode because I'm so sick of hearing, and of hearing those kinds of beliefs, and of like this spiritual sometimes perspective, or natural perspective, which is beautiful, but like completely discounting, like completely living in denial of trauma and of healing, and of actually diving into trauma, and not presenting birth as actually, well, no, like birthing in this era now as human beings is actually an opportunity to heal trauma, and it's actually like processing deep trauma. It's like it's ugly, basically, if we put it in a society word, it's raw, it's not fun, and it's deeply, it can be scary at time. It's it shakes your entire world, and it's meant to, and it's a moment that, yes, you're not going to feel comfortable. It's not going to be comfortable. It's going to be actually fucking painful, and you're going to go through those moments where you're going to want to give up. You're going to want to, you're going to swear to God, like, what was my idea behind having that's the stupidest shit that I've done so far, and you're going to feel this way because it's painful, because your trauma is going to come up, your emotional wounds are going to come up, and you're going to be faced with them, and you're going to have to swim in this, you're going to have to swim in it. It's going to be painful. You're going to have to swim in it, and you don't need to swim perfectly in it. You're just going to have to hold on. That's the truth, And so yes, there's many like knowledge and content and things we can read about birth, how like it's the natural process. Yes, all of that is beautiful, but the truth of the matter is, and the reality of it is, you're going to face trauma. You're going to face trauma. You're going to face a painful time. It's going to be a painful experience. Um, and pain meaning liberating, not necessarily traumatizing, but high chance that it might be traumatizing. And it's, at least it's going to be painful. And when we experience pain for like a long amount of time, it creates trauma, obviously, because it's a natural body response, and there's nothing wrong. But most women have birth trauma, and I'm so sick of people pretending, and women also pretending, that they don't have birth trauma, that it went all, now it's over, and just being complete fucking denial of the trauma of their birth they still hold, and pretending and trying to convince themselves that it was a beautiful experience, like society is expecting me to say. No, like it's a raw experience. Yes, it doesn't have to be horrible, but if I had to be honest, if like I was speaking to someone who's about to have a child, like it's gonna be fucking painful. It's not gonna be a walk in the park. It's gonna be challenging. It's gonna be like that. Think of the most challenging experience you had in your life, the most difficult one. It's gonna equal this, it's gonna be exactly the same way, like even more challenging. It's gonna be this long marathon, And you know, as if like it's gonna be this long 3-week hike where you're getting lost and you don't even find your way anymore, and you're just like, why did I fucking had this idea in the first place to take this hike, and getting lost and kind of being hungry and thirsty, starting panicking. Like this is basically how it's gonna feel like, you know. You're gonna start by, okay, yeah, this is okay, but the more time it goes, then you start feeling your, I don't know, your leg is, it's like you get injured all of a sudden, and you're in fucking pain, and you have to still hike. You cannot find a place, a shelter, and you're still walking. Like that is how it's going to feel like, you know. In the beginning you can handle it, but then the hours pass, and you start feeling like, do I really want to do this anymore? Well, now I'm in it, you know, I'm stuck in it. So I'm gonna have to deal with it, you know? And so you're gonna have to scream, you're gonna have to yell at everybody, you're gonna have to be inconvenient, you're gonna have to be loud, you're gonna have to be all those things that women have been you know, forbidden to be and to experience because we've been oppressed, you know, like by patriarchy, by this society. So yeah, I think it's important to talk about this matter. I think it's important to talk about, you know, this matter and this issue. And it's very important that we speak with honesty about birth, because we put so much women pressure on ourselves, and then we just end up being so shocked with the reality of it. So just wanted to make this episode. If you're expecting a child, or if you're already a mother and you feel guilty, or you feel, you know, your mental health is suffering still because of all the birth you had, or that one birth you had, and you're still suffering from it. I mean, how wouldn't you, like, if you didn't, you know, acknowledge the trauma you have, and the birth trauma, you know? It's completely normal in this time, in this experience, to experience that, you know? And we just don't talk about it enough. We just try to hide the truth, all as we do as always, you know? So yeah, that was for this episode, an intense episode. I'm very passionate about this, honestly. So thank you for listening and watching if you're on YouTube until the end. I was so glad to do this episode. If you're interested in diving deeper in trauma and trauma healing, I have created a free webinar on how to heal trauma that you will find in my description below. You find the link below. And aside from that, I'm wishing you goddess a beautiful day, and keep rising, keep shining. Send you much love.